Hello vinyl community. I have a ton of records to show today, so I'm just going to whip through these as fast as I can. I spent the afternoon in Berkeley, and first port of call was intended to be the separate vinyl annex that Rasputin's used to have, called Mad Monk. When I got there, that's gone. They've moved all their vinyl back into the main store. So while I was on that block, I went to Amoeba, picked up just one thing, this really nice copy of Dansere by the Jan Garbarek Bobo Stenson Quartet with Palle Danielson on bass and Jon Christensen on drums. This was kind of a harbinger of the rest of the visit because I found a lot of great ECM stuff to fill some holes in my collection, including a major grail. So next visit was Rasputin itself. I picked up this Odyssey release of Boulet's Le Marteau sans Maître and Stockhausen's Zeitmasse, some 20th century classical chamber music. The Boulez is said to be a pretty inaccurate performance because the music is just so difficult that these musicians couldn't really cope with the difficulty of the rhythms, but it's still really great to listen to. So pleased to have that, and it's got the original Odyssey inner sleeve, which is a nice bonus. You don't always get the original inner sleeve. Also at Rasputin's, I picked up this Peter Gordon Star Jaws album on the Lovely Music label. This is semi-experimental, but also very poppy. The music on the instrumental tracks is quite bouncy, even though there's a kind of Steve Reich or Philip Glass kind of experimental sensibility at work with the use of variations combined with repetition. Also some vocal, fairly straight art pop pieces. Peter Gordon's voice is not great. Definitely in the Lou Reed vein. Unfortunately, this copy was scratched, so when I got it home, it turned out to have a nasty skip in it, and when I had a look, it was a tiny little, very deep scratch parallel to the groove, so no way to fix that. I got burned on this one, and it would be more than it was worth to go try to return it. I'm not going to go all the way back to Berkeley. Manfred Schoof Quintet, or Schoaf probably, on the Japo label. Nice mid-70s release, a quintet with Michael Piltz on bass clarinet and Jasper Van Hoff on the keyboards. And from there I went to a shop I hadn't been to before, a pretty small place, Dave's Records on San Pablo, and that turned out to be a really nice store, really good for jazz. The selection is not huge, but quality. And I picked up several items. I got this Larry Coryell album where he is accompanied by members of Oregon, Ralph Towner, Glenn Moore, and Colin Walcott. So 3/4 of Oregon. And this is a mid-70s release. I haven't heard that one yet. I certainly heard this one. Danza das Cabezas by Egberto Gismonti with Nana Vasconcelos on berimbau and percussion and voice. This is a great one. This is an American copy on ECM. Ronald Shannon Jackson and the Decoding Society. Love this cover. This is from 1980, and this is a band with Vernon Reid as one of the guitarists. So, you know, just from that, it's going to be pretty hot. This is really wild, not really funky, but just wild jazz, and also very tight, very experimental, but very accessible. He's got 2 sax players. He's got Billy Bang on violin, 2 guitars, bass, and of course the man on drums. This also has percussion by Erasto Vasconcelos, who was the brother of Nana Vasconcelos. So that family seems to come up. Both of them recently deceased. Both Nana and Erasto passed away in 2016. So this one was definitely a good choice. Had not heard any of that before. And this one I've never owned in physical format, but I found it in a dollar bin. Pat Metheny and Lyle Mays, As Falls Wichita, So Falls Wichita Falls. Great album, and again, Nana Vasconcelos is on this one. Quite prominent on the last piece, which is Estupenda Graça, which I gather is Portuguese for Amazing Grace. And you'll definitely hear the strains of Amazing Grace in that melody. From there, it was on to Grooveyard. Amazing shop, tiny place, hole in the wall, packed up to the ceiling with records. So it's actually very difficult to get around in that place. You kind of have to squeeze your body and do a lot of leaning over and moving huge stacks of records off of other stacks of records. But the owner told me that he had, because I was finding a lot of these interesting ECM titles that were sealed or pristine import copies. Apparently these are from a warehouse find. So that included this solo bass recording by Dave Holland, Emerald Tears, from 1977. And this album I had actually picked up from the regular racks a different copy, an American copy, which I thought, well, maybe I can clean it up. This album has a mainly white cover with embossed lettering, and every copy you find is filthy because that raised lettering just picks up every speck of dirt and dust. So it's usually sort of outlined in black. This import copy was sealed, and it had been sealed in Germany because the Rick Ballard import label that you see on these German ECM titles was on the shrink wrap, not on the disc itself. So this is a great mid-70s recording of Keith Jarrett's compositions for Jan Garbarek with orchestra for strings. Another ECM classic, and related on the Japo label, Herbert Yos, and again with string orchestra and winds, in this case Herbert Yos himself on the trumpet and flugelhorn, and Thomas Schwartz on oboe. And like some of these warehouse items, I guess, this is a promo copy, it has a promo sticker on the back, as does this one, Steve Kuhn and Ecstasy. Now, Steve Kuhn's previous album on ECM had been a solo piano recording called Ecstasy. This is a quartet called Ecstasy. The album is Motility. Again, there's that promo sticker, and I love this cover. I love the artwork of Maya Weber, who was Eberhard Weber's wife. Particular favorite of mine is the John Abercrombie First Gateway album. And also got this Stockhausen album, classic of electronic music, Song of the Youths, or Gesang der Jünglinge, and Contact. This, the Song of the Youths, is a combination of pure electronic sounds with recordings of children's voices electronically manipulated. So, again, that is a true classic. And some more old electronic music. This recording on Turnabout, which includes some pieces by Ilan Mimarolu and Wendy Carlos, back when she was still Walter. This is back before the switched on Bach, I'm sure. The pieces are variations for flute and electronic sound, and dialogues for piano and 2 loudspeakers. So it's not even with Moog, it's just tape music and oscillators and such. And so that was a lot of stuff I'd found at his shop, and I was about ready to walk out the door before I happened to look up on the wall and saw the Grail. 6th release on ECM, output by Wolfgang Dauner, sealed. Even though it was sealed, you can see that this copy has a lot of lamination separating off. That's just the nature of the way this was produced. The record itself, obviously no one had ever touched it. So that was not cheap, I'm afraid, so I'm going to have a credit card shock this month, but it was worth it. And I'd had a bunch of other records come in this week, so I got the Steven Wilson remixes of the classic Yes albums from 1971 through 1974. There are a lot of unboxing videos of this, so I won't show all the individual covers, but most of them have reworked covers where Roger Dean has rejiggered the art, and those are pretty fantastic, actually. Got this vinyl reissue of Le Orme, Piccola Rapsodia dell'Ape. This is classic Italian prog band who found it expedient to go acoustic at this time. And this was reissued on very bright yellow vinyl. Love that. From the Bureau B label, reissues of the 3rd and 4th Helden albums. This is the 3rd album, It's Always Rock and Roll. And the 4th album, Agneta Nilsson. There was an album released in America on the Oral Explorer label with this same cover. It wasn't quite this same album, though. It was actually partly this album and part of this album combined. These are very experimental, drony electronic and guitar pieces, heavily inspired by Fripp and Eno, but with a much heavier sound. And finally, I got a nice original copy of 801 Live, Phil Manzanera and Brian Eno. And this is the British first version, which has a somewhat different cover design from the American version, and it's on the Island label. It was reissued a year later, so later UK copies and I think all American copies are on Polydor. Okay, I managed to whip through it, so thank you very much for watching and see you again soon. Bye-bye.